Cut.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for hanging out with Dimension Data this afternoon or this morning or this evening, depending what part of the world you're joining us from. So we've got a nice kind of global call with you today. Joining us, we've got in the UK, we have Andy Stevens from the Carbon Trust.
Hi,
Say hi, Andy.
Hi.
And also in the UK, we've got Julie Craig from Carbon Smart. Say hi, Julie.
Hello everyone, nice to meet you.
Now, we were going to complete this whole transatlantic conference here by having Daryl Stickler joining us from Cisco. I'm not sure whether maybe there's a few connection issues going on over there, but hopefully Daryl will be joining us in a few minutes to go and talk a little more about this. So the aim of today really is to go and explain Dimension Data's new environmental sustainability targets. So what are they? Why did we come up with them in the first place? How we're going to go and achieve them? How we're going to go and measure them? And if you've got any questions as well, you can go and ask those on the events page on which you joined. Or if you've got access to Twitter, you can go and use the hashtag of DD Hangouts. Go and tweet on there, and those will come through to us. So, maybe if I start off talking about these in the first place, Dimension Data has decided that it wants to do something about the environment. Now, climate change is a massive, massive problem for all of us. And if any of you have been watching the news, you can see the fact that things really aren't getting that much better. And a lot of the solution comes down to businesses making a difference. It's businesses that are part of this problem, and it's businesses that can help go and get us out of this. So it's really incumbent on all the business community to go and start trying to make a difference. And one of the ways in which we can do that is actually by stating our aims, by putting some targets in place. So about a year ago, we started thinking about what ours should be. We already had some targets in place, but we wanted to work out what that next stage would be after that. And we started looking at it, and we thought we can do the kind of cool, catchy thing that a lot of people do and look at reducing our carbon footprint by 20% by 2020, because that sounds really good, 20, wonderful. But we thought in reality, it's got to go and mean something. It's got to go and make a difference. We thought about it a little bit more and thought, well, actually, what can we do? Now, Dimension Data is quite a big company. We've got about 25,000 people around the world. We spread out in 58 countries. But we don't make anything. We're not a manufacturer. You know, what we tend to go and do is we take the things that other people make, and we make it go and do smart things to go and help their businesses. So we're a kind of systems integrator. We're a services company. So actually setting targets to go and reduce our own carbon footprint is nice, but it's not the be-all and the end-all, and you've got to go and think, is that really going to go and solve a lot of the problems in the world by doing that? So we scratched our head long and hard and thought about all this and thought, well, you know, in reality, what can we do? There was a very good report written by a group called the Global E-Sustainability Initiative, or GESI for short, the Smart 2020 report, later updated to be the Smarter 2020 report. What they identified was that the IT sector probably consumes about probably creates about 2% of the carbon footprint in the world. So if the IT sector wants to do something, it could either reduce some of that 2%, or it could use its technology to go and help the world. And what the report identified was that if we all actually start to use ICT in a slightly more clever way, we can actually make a really big difference. So we can actually maybe go and reduce the global carbon footprint by 16.5%. We'll start using ICT to get more clever power distribution networks, smarter buildings, to go on video conference more instead of flying around the world. So we could go and reduce a massive amount, 16.5% of that global carbon footprint, and at the same time potentially go and save about $1.9 trillion for the global economy. And I can see that Daryl Stickler, the subject of the word global, has just joined us from the United States in San Francisco. So welcome, Daryl, and thank you for joining us at this terrible hour of the morning for you.
Yeah, 6 o'clock's pretty early, Colin. Glad to be here.
Good to see you. Thank you for getting up so early. And I can see you've cycled into your room there.
Is it okay if I drink a little coffee on video?
Please do. I don't blame you. So we thought about that report, and we thought, in reality, what Dimension Data can go and do is do good things. You know, we need to actually go and make a difference. And if you think about having a target to go and reduce our carbon footprint, What to me that was saying was we want to be less bad. We want to pollute the world less. That's not what we want to do. We want to do some good. We want to make a positive contribution and use IT in a really good way. So we thought about what that Smarter 2020 report said, and we said, well, how do we kind of play our part in all of that? How do we actually go and make a difference there? And we looked and we thought, we got some great solutions. We do wonderful things. We provide huge amounts of visual communications and video conferencing. We help our clients with cloud computing. We do massive amounts in data centers. And our data centers are a big consumer of energy. We can help go and reduce that a lot. You know, and there's all these new technology trends that are coming up, and we've got some sharp guys that are at the forefront of these, so we can innovate around this. But we also thought technology is great at solving these problems, but it's got a bit of a dark side as well, which is that the more technology is used, the more electronic waste is created. So we maybe need to make sure that as people using technology, they're dealing with it responsibly and they're dealing with the impacts of that. So when we looked at our targets, we thought, okay, so it's got to be about making sure we go and reduce carbon, not just reduce our own carbon footprint, but reduce carbon globally. And we're going to do that by helping our clients. But at the same time, we need to make sure our own carbon footprint doesn't grow out of proportion. We're providing a lot of cloud computing to our clients, and our clients are asking us more and more for that kind of thing. And as they move their computing workload to Dimension Data, our carbon footprints will grow. And we're in the lucky position of growing as a business. But we've got to make sure we grow proportionately and responsibly. So we had to look at three things, which is helping our clients reduce their carbon emissions, limiting the growth of our own carbon footprint, and helping manage the electronic waste that's produced as a result of all of this. You know, and some of the reasons we thought we wanted to go and do that was that, in reality, you know, our vision has always been about using IT to go and do good things. So our target should reflect that. And our business is really, really client-centric. Everything we do is around helping our clients. So our targets have really got to reflect that, otherwise our business is going one way, and our environmental ambitions are going the other way. That's not good. We need to go in the same direction. Thirdly, probably the most important one to me, fixing real problems is going to take more than just little old Dimension Data. It's going to take lots of effort from companies to go and collaborate. We're fortunate enough that 80%, nearly 80% of the Fortune 100 companies are our clients. So we can make a far better difference if we work together with those big organizations to go and do something good. And we know they're all concentrating on these issues themselves. So by getting our collective heads together, we can go and do something good with this. So, to cut a long story short, we kind of decided we wanted to arrive at these targets, which was to use technology to save more carbon for our clients than we produce ourselves over a 5-year period. That's kind of key report. Period for our business. Did a whole load of work. What impact can we make? You know, based on how much our business is growing, based on what we can realistically do. And with some fantastic work from the people that you can see on this call, from Andy, from Julie, and from Daryl, we kind of came to the conclusion that what we want to do is, drum roll, to reduce 1.8 million tons more carbon for our clients than we produce ourselves, while at the same time preventing 4,000 tons of electronic waste from going to landfill. And that's over a 5-year period. That's from 2013. Specifically the beginning of our financial year 2014, so that's October the 1st, 2013, to 2018, which is 2018. So during that time, 1.8 million tons more carbon for our clients we want to reduce than we produce ourselves, and prevent 4,000 tons of electronic waste. What I'd like to go and do is, I mentioned earlier on 3 ways in which we're going to go and achieve this, which is helping our clients reduce their carbon, to go and limit the growth of our own carbon footprint, and to go and manage the electronic waste going to landfill. So I'd like to hand over at this point to Andy Stevens, who's done some terrific work around how we can go and help our clients reduce their carbon emissions. And Andy can talk a little bit more around the things we intend to go and do and how we're going to go and measure that. Over to you, Andy.
Okay, thanks very much, Colin. Can you hear me okay?
It's
Sure.
good.
Yeah, great. So I really like the way that Dimension Data set these targets because it acknowledges the environmental impact that Dimension Data has. And at the same time, it includes the positive impact that Dimension Data services can provide. So currently, there's in the media, there's a lot of campaigns, there's a lot of talk about the emissions from data centers. I think that's quite right, because data centers do use a lot of electricity and they drive a lot of emissions. And so that's right. And Dimension Data's targets reflect that, but they also include the positive impact, the positive enabling impact from Dimension Data services. So that's both video conferencing and data center services provided by Dimension Data. And so I'd like to sort of call these smart targets rather than dumb targets. And it is, to me, it's sort of moving forward and it's quite exciting. So the ICT industry has been talking about this enabling effect of ICT since the Smart 2020 report was published in 2008, which Colin mentioned earlier. And that identified ICT has got the potential to save up to 15% of global emissions. And that sort of sounds like really significant. However, what's actually happening is that companies, although they're sort of following that, until very recently, very few companies have actually been measuring that, and so they can be able to demonstrate what they're actually doing. And that's sort of really sort of interesting, I think. And I'll go on to tell you a bit more about what the Carbon Trust has done in this role to help Dimension Data with setting and measuring these targets. So we've basically worked with Dimension Data to develop the methodology. And what's, to me, again, is really good is the way that Dimension Data have published this methodology. So they've been very transparent in what they're doing and allowing other people to see sort of it in a lot of detail, but also to sort of comment on that and to get involved. And we've looked at the savings, as I mentioned, both from Dimension Data's video conferencing, but also from Dimension Data's cloud computing services. So for video conferencing, we've included video conferencing and telepresence. And those, it's very simple to understand how those can avoid carbon emissions by people not having to travel to meetings. So you can have a face-to-face meeting, but without having the travel to get there. So you're saving those carbon emissions. How to actually quantify those is maybe a little bit more difficult. So what we've done, looked at, there's some studies that have been produced, but also Dimension Data have been collecting their own data around this. And this research showed that typically an unmanaged video conference system can save about 20,000 kilometers of travel per year, whereas a fully fledged telepresence suite, fully managed telepresence suite, which is like a much more immersive technology, that can save nearly 1 million kilometers per year in travel. So that they're really sort of quite significant if it's because of the greater utilization. And so basically we took those figures, as I say, that's based on some research studies and also Dimension Data collecting data on the conferencing services they provide, so that we could build up a picture of how much travel is saved and what the total impact of that is in terms of carbon. And on the cloud computing side, again, we turn to some published studies. There's one from Lawrence Berkeley in the United States and one from Imperial College in the UK, which looked at savings from cloud computing in both the US and in Europe. And those sort of together sort of basically indicate that on average, a typical migration of a server into a cloud environment saves about 4,000 kilowatt hours in a year. So again, we took that data, that figure, and multiplied it up to the total impact that Dimension Data will have in a year and then over the 5-year period that these targets are set for. So that's very, very simple, and the full sort of calculations methodology is listed in the methodology document that Dimension Data have published. There's also an area for Dimension Data to include sort of other new, like, innovative technologies which maybe they've not developed yet. But that's another nice thing about this, is that it drives them correct motivation and behavior within Dimension Data to come up with new and innovative ways of also saving carbon for their customers. So that will also be included, and we can review that to include it in those, capturing within those targets. So in conclusion, I'd just like to sum up that very quickly, that I really like this set of smart targets, and I like the way that it's been made transparent by Dimension Data, and I think that this is sort of like a way that the industry is moving forward. There are other companies which are starting to do this, but I think Dimension Data are at the sort of forefront of this. I wish Dimension Data all the success in the challenge they've set out here to meet these targets over the next 5 years. And I think also, as Colin mentioned, this isn't something that Dimension Data are doing on their own. So they're doing it in conjunction with their customers, and other ICT companies are doing similar things as well. So thanks very much, Colin.
Okay, I think we're just waiting for Colin to come back on the call, but I note that my piece is up next, so if Colin doesn't do an intro, then I'll take you guys through how I'm involved with Dimension Data in managing their carbon footprint. So,
sorry, I do apologise. I had a brief user error on this side, I'm afraid, at this point, so sorry about that, but Julie, please do continue.
So yeah, as I was saying, been working with Dimension Data, looking introspectively at their own organisation. So as Andy iterated, the whole targets piece is about both looking at the client aspect, but also about Dimension Data itself. And we agonised for a good long time about whether you can really harness and reduce impact for such a large organisation. I've been working with Colin now since 2011 on understanding the impact of their organisation, and as it is so large, it is a massive challenge to understand what their impact is now, but also what their impact may be in future. And it's very, very hard to get to grips with that without really getting into the numbers. So what we've been working on is the part of the target that is 1.8 million tonnes for our clients, more than we produce ourselves, and that's what we looked at. So Dimension Data have a very dynamic way of calculating their own emissions. They work with a piece of software that they collect information from all of their sites across the globe. It's a formidable task to get all of that information on a quarterly basis, but they really are making strides in the right direction to understand their impact and to be able to quantify it. So they really engage everybody in this process, and that's why I'm quite confident that, that Dimension Data are getting a good handle on what they're doing, and also really working with that ambition to not significantly increase their emissions as they grow so rapidly. And that's the study that we've been undertaking. So within their carbon footprint, they reach out to all of their different offices. They have country-level representatives getting data on the ground. They have regional representatives aggregating the data and checking that it's right. And they roll up that data to a top level to give themselves a global impact. And we've done that piece of work now for about 3 years running. And total impact for DD in FY13, where we had a good set of numbers, was just over 120,000 tonnes of carbon. So what we did with Colin is we said, well, if that's the impact then, what might it look like in 5 years? So the piece of work we've been doing is trying to figure out what Dimension Data's carbon footprint will look like in 5 years, and thereby how much are we reducing through our IT services in the piece of work that Andy's been doing. So Colin's managed to distribute responsibility for monitoring and keeping control of the carbon footprint at a regional basis to the chief operating officers around DD, which is a great way to share the responsibility and show the commitment that Dimension Data has to managing its impact. What we did in our study is, with trying to look at what the impact will be in FY18, is project the growth of DD. It's a tricky thing to do, but we've scaled their carbon footprint across the next 5 years to try and take into account how they're going to grow and the different areas in which they're going to grow. So with Colin's help and all of their regional representatives, we've scratched our heads and looked at the different service lines that are really going to expand, particularly IT as a service and putting IT services into the cloud space. And we've managed to work out that by FY18, the anticipated carbon footprint at Dimension Data will be something in the order of 320,000 tonnes per annum. So we're talking an increase of over 200,000 tonnes per annum from the picture that we're looking at now. So a substantially larger organisation that will have grown rapidly. The aggregated effect is a 5-year carbon impact of over 1 million tonnes of carbon. So that's when you start to really get an idea that as Dimension Data grow and support their clients to reduce their impact, they really need to keep in check what they're doing themselves. But within their targets, they recognize that there is going to be an increase operationally as they have more data centers, as they provide more services for those clients. So their ambition is to keep that to a sensible level, where possible reduce or maintain the intensity of the carbon emissions that they produce. So there are a few different ways in which we anticipate that they can keep this in best check, and they've carefully selected different areas that really make sense to DD. So one is going forward to manage and maintain or reduce the amount of CO2 per rack of equipment in their managed cloud platforms. So that's a really key one that's a really fast-growing area within DD, and one that, as a market leader, DD are going to keep the reins on and keep the CO2 in check. Now, it's all right having an aspirational statement, but we also need to make sure we're managing that. So all of the guys at the different managed cloud platform units are now intensively starting to collect data to keep that energy consumption in check over the next 5 years. So that's the first way in which we're going to manage the carbon footprint, is to keep that CO2 per rack of equipment down. And that's going to be done in a number of ways, rolling out a FAITH program that looks very carefully at how data centers are located, the energy sources that are used to bring the electricity into the data centers, and of course the way in which they procure, the way in which Dimension Data is sensible in what they do will affect their clients' choices to go with them and have a positive impact for the clients with them going with Dimension Data as opposed to others. So that's a really key area for DD. The second area which they will manage their carbon footprint in is to actually look at their office spaces. As you all know, as a service industry, Dimension Data is very strong in terms of people on the ground. So they have lots of employees working from home, in office spaces, and traveling intensively to get the great services out there. So the second way they manage it is carbon footprint per FTE. So we monitor and measure this through the Credit 360 system. Regular monitoring of particularly the large sites, looking for anomalies, looking for increases in energy, and having a sort of spot check and feedback session, trying to make sure that any areas that are increasing rapidly can be caught and can be quelled, so that the intensity of CO2 per FTE and expanding business is well managed, well monitored, and the early warning flags are out there if anything is looking like it's on the increase. And then the third area, also a key one for Dimension Data being in the IT world, is to manage the PUE in their data centers. So they're looking to keep the PUE ratio at 1.5 or below in order to ensure that they are running effective and efficient data centers to provide to their clients, meaning that there isn't wastage going into the ancillary services that are running within the data center outside of their core computing, which is what they're trying to achieve. So 1.5 after lots of research, and I'll bow to Dimension's Data, to their expertise on the numbers, but 1.5 is a sensible point and a stretch target for them to meet within the services that they provide. So there's those three streams, one being PUE, one being focusing on offices, and the other being looking at their managed cloud platforms to ensure that they're being as effective as possible. Now we have to acknowledge within this that DD is a huge organization, so it's likely that as we move through these 5 years, things will move around a little bit. We'll find new data, we'll work out ways of being more clever in managing our data, and we'll certainly begin to see the results of all the different efforts of the energy efficiency studies that DD are carrying out to deliver on these targets. So it's a bit of a moving one. We don't know precisely where we're going to be in 5 years, but at the moment, that's the sort of standard by which we hang our hat, and DD's impact of approximately 1 million tonnes over the next 5 years is that point above and beyond which they're going to save their clients the additional 1.8 million tonnes. So we're talking big numbers and big aspirations, and it's great to be working with a company that really are going for it in a big way. So thanks for having us on board, and also it's great to see these ambitions unfold. Back to you, Colin.
Thank you, Julie. We couldn't do it without you. And I've got to admit, I'm now breathing easier because you make it sound easy. You really do. It should be straightforward. So, no, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think the carbon side of it is one key point. And I think there is a lot of focus out there in the world about carbon. But electronic waste is a huge, huge issue. We're all generating more e-scrap, as Daryl tends to go and call it, and a lot more things. And we need to go and look at not just to make sure that's disposed of carefully, but actually to make sure we're making the most of what we make, so we're going conserving the natural resources, because we're running out of stuff in the ground to go and make things out of. We need to be a little bit clever about that. So we set to creating a target around e-waste, and we did a lot of chatting with Cisco, who got this great vision of the circular economy and are working with many others who share this vision, and it's something we share as well. And Daryl can talk about this far better than I can. So Daryl, if you're okay, I'll hand over to you to go and chat about our targets and the work we're doing in this area.
All righty. You can hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, excellent. So actually, Colin, I want to tell a kind of a personal story, because you remember, how this all started. You and I, we met out in the sustainability desert. I think we were trying to think, and we went off, and we both had the same idea. So we're out there, and I think you were in your Tesla, and I had borrowed Carl Sagan's Ship of the Imagination. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he has it now. So you were driving on Dimension Data Sustainability Highway, and I was on Cisco Product Return Road, and we both stopped at the light right in front of the Circular Economy Cafe. I don't know if you remember this, because it's been a little while, but so we pulled in for a spot.
I remember it well.
You do. I know. That Tesla is really cool. I almost traded you, but Neil would have been mad if I hadn't, returned his ship. So I think he's got season 2 coming up. So anyhow, we pulled in, and we were there at that cafe, the Circular Economy Cafe, and we pulled in for a spot of Fair Trade Coffee, and we talked about teaming up Dimension Data and Cisco to work together on sustainability. We wanted to know, okay, we're both working on it as individual companies, but surely we can do more together. So it turned out that Dimension Data and Cisco had a similar view of environmental priorities. Cisco had been concentrating on greenhouse gas and energy consumption. Andy mentioned the cutting air travel, and we've been doing that as well. But we both, Dimension Data and Cisco, have also been, concerned about what happens to products after a customer is done with them. And you're right, we use e-scrap because we don't want to call it e-waste, because these products, they're not waste. There's a lot of value left in them, and part of the challenge of this whole thing is figuring out how to maximize the value. It's kind of like the same thing behind the sharing economy that we're hearing about. So greenhouse gas energy and product after the customer is done with it, that's what a lot of our stakeholders have been telling us for years. And you told me Dimension Data was working on the same things. And then I mentioned that Cisco was working on this new holistic concept called the circular economy. And this cafe just happened to be named the same thing. I mean, who would have thought, right? And, a true and perfect circular economy where you take raw materials, you make a product, and then you turn it back into raw materials to make a new product, that's pretty tough to do right away. But every journey starts with the first step, and we agreed that a circular economy wouldn't get off the ground if we didn't solve the problem of getting stuff back from our customers, because that's what primes the circular economy pump, if you will. And then you told me that Dimension Data wanted to announce a new goal, challenging yourselves and Cisco also to get electronic network equipment back, a lot more stuff. So 4,000 tons of network gear. And that's a lot of equipment. And it's going to be a noticeable increase in what Cisco receives from the field from all of our customers. I mean, it's really going to move the needle. So Cisco has been offering free recycling to our customers for more than 10 years. And we've been accepting trade-ins of used equipment for a long time as well. But the product return, it's ad hoc and unplanned. We had difficulty, stakeholders said, can you set a goal? And we really had difficulty figuring out how to set a return goal. We have greenhouse gas reduction goals, but the product return process kind of stumped us because, once we sell it, we don't really control what the customer does with it. So now we have a partner, a big partner like Dimension Data, who together, Cisco and Dimension Data, we supply products to many, many customers all over the world. So it just makes sense that if we partner together to get these products back after the customer is done with them, that we're going to be a lot more successful. So I'm really excited that we'll be able to show how good universal return, let's brand it 100% take back, how good it'll be for our customers and for Dimension Data, for Cisco, and also the environment.
Darryl, that's fantastic, and I want to go back to that cafe again at some point. That was so good.
Yeah, I'm into coffee, so let's go. I'll even let you drive the ship of the imagination next time, okay? I was a little nervous.
I need the imagination to get that Tesla back.
Okay.
Now, I'm conscious we've got a little bit over time here, so for anybody who's still on the Hangout, first of all, I do apologize if we're a little bit late here. But I at this point, just to go and summarize everything we've talked about, our aim is to go and reduce 1.8 million tons more carbon for our clients than we produce ourselves, and to prevent 4,000 tons of electronic waste from going to landfill over a 5-year period. And we're 20% of the way through. It's from 2013, we're now well into 2014, nearly 2015. So if anybody has any questions about how we intend to go and do that and how we've calculated this, and really, do I really have a Tesla, and actually is there a circular economy cafe, please do go and ask questions either on the events page on which you logged onto this, or on Twitter using the hashtag #DDHangouts, and the questions will come through to the wonderful panel of Andy, and Darryl, and Julie, and myself, and we'll try our best to go and answer those questions.